Warning: the Not Real Art podcast is intended for creative audiences only. The Not Real Art podcast celebrates creativity and creative culture worldwide. It contains material that is fresh, fun and inspiring and is not suitable for boring old art snobs. Now, let's get started and enjoy the show.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow creators. Welcome to Not Real Art, the podcast that celebrates creativity and creative culture worldwide. I'm your host, Sourdough, and on today's episode, I'm honored to be joined by our first interior architect to the show, by the way, my good friend, Nina Hiken from Nina Hiken Design.
Hello.
Hey, Nina.
I am so excited to be here.
Great to see you. It's been too long.
It's been way too long. I just want to say that I do not know how to speak into a mic, so
That makes two of us.
All right.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay.
It's the blind leading the blind here.
Okay. We like it
or
that
in my
way.
case, the deaf leading the blind or something. How have you been? It's been too long. You've been very busy, I take it.
Yep. I've been very busy. I've been blessed with a lot of projects and a lot of wonderful clients. And
Oh, come on. Clients aren't wonderful. Clients are a pain in the ass.
well, but you know, if they didn't need me, I wouldn't have work.
Yes, it is a delicate relationship.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's their need that makes the relationship viable.
Yes.
So I've learned to actually really embrace every quirk.
Have you ever fired a client?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that like? What were the conditions?
You know, I was very passionate about the project, as I always am.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we had a setback in the beginning. There were some code issues and some confusion on how to proceed in getting our permits. And she felt that it was my fault, that the confusion was my fault. And I was never forgiven for that initial confusion.
Yeah.
So there was this underlying, frustration on her part that everything that went wrong was due to that initial sin.
Yeah.
And we never got over it. So, there's going to be mistakes on a job, and forgiveness is crucial.
Yeah, right.
Forgiveness is really crucial.
Well, and I mean, right. And part of it is how savvy is the client around design and the process and the contact sport of it all.
Yeah. And we were talking about expectation management.
Yep.
And this was a case where I failed to pave a certain road of expectations for her.
Right.
And I failed to explain to her that when you take plans to the LA Department of Building and Safety, it is the beginning of a journey.
Yeah, right.
And that you're going to go back once, you're going to go back twice, you're going to go back 3 or 4 times because they don't always know what they need to tell you until they see the plans 2 or 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, right.
So because I hadn't had as much experience as I do now in that particular case, when the cycle started and we weren't getting what she wanted in the time frame she wanted it, she just broke down.
Yeah.
And had I prepared her better, her disappointment might have been different.
Yeah.
So that's one of those cases where I had a big, valuable takeaway. And I don't blame her for her frustration, but it did prevent us from bonding and having a great working relationship.
Yeah.
And designing for somebody is so intimate. You really got to get up in their stuff.
Yeah, right.
I want to know where you put your toothbrush. I need to know how much space you need on your bedside table for your stuff.
Yeah.
How many plugs do you need?
Yeah.
And so if that's not fun, then the design process is just going to be a slog. It's going to be a real painful slog.
Well, it feels like people want to get to, they want to get to the fun stuff quick, right? And the reality is the fun stuff, picking out the furniture, picking out the colorways or, what have you. I mean, that is fun, but it's down the road a bit, right?
Yes.
I mean, let's better understand your needs and do that deep dive of of research, because it's research, isn't it, for you?
Oh, totally. I mean, one of the most exciting projects that I'm on this year we're just about to install her kitchen started as a code clearance issue.
Okay.
She had been ratted out by a neighbor for having a illegal office in her garage. And there was just one of those neighborly contention things. Mm-hmm. And so I was hired to help her deconstruct the office and get her through the citation clearance.
Yeah.
And she said, well, since you're an interior designer, I want to also do, my kitchen and my deck and my living room and the painting. And she had this huge list, but there was a giant question mark about what we'd be able to do, because we didn't know how much the citation clearance was going to cost. So I did have, I would say, as opposed to the first example I gave you, really excellent expectation management in this case. And I said, look, we don't know what they're going to ask us to do. Mm-hmm. We don't know what they're going to ask us to dismantle or build. So let's break this project into phases and let's get you through phase 1.
Yeah.
Phase 1 is citation clearance.
Right.
And let's find out how much that costs. And then let's plan phase 2. And we had a miraculous experience getting through phase 1. We didn't have to do half the things that we thought we might have to do. Mm-hmm. And, the city will never tell you until you're in the process.
Sure.
They're not going to say you have to redo this electrical, or you've got to, change your garage door opening, or God knows what. You just have to get into the process, take a deep breath, and roll with it.
Yeah.
And we got through it. We had a great inspector. He really understood the difficulties and the constraints of her property. And, she had a very small property. And we got through phase 1. And then we got to really celebrate with phase 2, which is remodel the kitchen.
Yes.
Knock out the deck.
Yeah. The fun stuff.
The real fun stuff. Yeah. So we're in that right now. And her deck's almost done, and her kitchen's going in 2 weeks. And, by Day of the Dead, she'll be cooking in a new kitchen.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, there was so much in that, because, how savvy a client is or isn't, that's all about experience, right? And like one of the experiences I know I was surprised by when my wife and I were, working, remodeling our house and what have you, was how dysfunctional the workflow was with the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for example, you talked about having one inspector, or implied that maybe you had one inspector on that project. When my wife and I did our house, our contractor was going nuts because the city was sending a different inspector every time, and there was no continuity.
I remember that. It was maddening.
Yeah.
It was maddening.
Yeah, I guess for our listeners' sake, we should in the spirit of full transparency here, we should confess that you and I met because my wife and I hired you and your partner to remodel to help us design and remodel our new home.
Right. It was an incredible job.
Yeah.
It was an amazing project. And Nicole Kramer and I had an amazing time.
Shout out, Nicole.
Yeah. We had an amazing time doing that project.
Well, you guys were awesome, and we were probably less awesome, but I know we loved the process. And Channing and I, all the time are so grateful for that, because you guys were so different, and you guys really worked hard to figure out the Venn diagram of our of our home.
Right, that's a great way of putting it too.
And what is that overlap? Mm-hmm. And boy, you just knocked it out of the park. Modern romance, I think, was that was our concept. The concept tagline. Yep. The North Star, right?
Yeah.
So part of the challenge in this home was, of course, and I'll personalize that. We'll just talk about this project a little bit. Not only was that was maddening, dealing with these different inspectors, but then there are so many sort of links in the value chain, the supply chain, right? And the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. So it's one thing to work with a competent architect or interior designer and then a builder. But then you've got to count on manufacturers to deliver quality products. And we ordered 19 windows and, we took the shipment and 50% of them were unusable because of manufacturing lack of quality control of the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And that we bogged down for weeks just trying to get the windows right,
Yeah.
So it's just so many moving parts.
There are a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
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 And usually when you have a great contractor, like we did with
Shout out Greg. Zadikoff, Greg Zadikoff.
Yeah, he's absolutely phenomenal, and a contractor like that can really facilitate and negotiate and problem solve all of those aspects of the job, as do the designers. When things come down the pipeline.
Your guys' customer service, client service, I guess is the way we put it, was so amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was just fantastic. So I have a question. I'm going to go back 10 steps.
Yes.
So is there a difference between an interior architect and an interior designer?
There's a spectrum.
And what do you consider yourself?
The most specific description of what my skill set is architectural interior designer.
Okay.
My degree is I have a master's in interior in architecture. Mm-hmm. We don't call ourselves interior architects because there's a title act where architect can only be used by landscape architects and architects.
That doesn't feel fair.
It's not, but it's one of those.
That feels like bullshit to me.
It's one of those things that has to be changed by a bill. It's got to be a state law that allows a certain professional to carry a certain title.
Is there a lobby?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are they working on that?
Yes, they are. The American Society of Interior Designers, which I am a part of,
yes.
ASID, is working on the Title Act, because if we can legally use a certain title, then we can distinguish our skill sets based on the services we provide. And that's really important for the consumer population. Yep. There's decorators who are incredibly good at picking window treatments or, fabrics or couches.
Putting on the candy coating.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm a decorator. But then there's another layer, which is design. And design is much more specifically, how does this fit? How does it work? How does it lay out? How does it flow? And then another layer below that is the architectural interior design part, where can I express it in a drawing? And that's what I do. Can I present what this concept is in a pictorial form that becomes a contract that the contractor can then execute?
Yes.
A decorator typically doesn't necessarily know how to draw. I don't want to diss decorators who do know how to draw, but it's typically not part of their work scope.
Yeah, for sure.
And some people who call themselves designers really are much more decorators. So it really goes from decorator to interior designer to architectural interior designer. That's kind of the spectrum. And I'm soup to nuts. I do it all.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, on a more cynical note, it just feels like, interior architects can charge more than interior designers, what I mean? Like, it sounds very fancy.
Yes. And you are definitely, if you're hiring somebody with that, level of training, you're basically getting someone who can do a really wide scope of, services for your project.
Yes.
And then it depends on what your project needs. Sometimes you're in a situation where you just want to fix up your office.
Yeah.
And you don't need all of that. Sometimes, like you and I, we designed this desk together.
Yes.
So that furniture design is something that anyone from a decorator to an interior architect could do.
Yeah.
Architects do a lot of furniture.
Yeah.
But again, can you draw it? Can you model it? Can you convey how it should be built? That's more architectural interior design than it is, or, really it's furniture design, but it has to be transmitted in some way,
right?
Not necessarily just verbally.
Well, one of the cool things that I've always appreciated about about you in particular, and then your profession level up is the what seems to me to be an art form that requires a really important balance between the right and the left brain.
Well, thank you. That's kind of my favorite part of interior design.
Yeah.
Something I learned in school, which has served me incredibly well. I learned from David Alvarez, my Studio 3 professor.
Shout out David.
Yeah, shout out David Alvarez, who has an architecture practice on the West Side. He would always say to us, "Are you designing or are you selecting?" And he did not want us to be selectors.
Sure, of course.
He is like, don't be a selector. Why is that table in your project? Why is that window where it is? Why is that wall where it is?
Yes.
And he was very derisive of the whole idea of just picking and choosing.
Yeah.
The alternative that he offered us was concept-driven design. And he insisted that we come up with concepts that serve the program.
Yes.
And that drive the program. And that's what we applied to your project,
Yes.
which made it work so well. And I love the Venn diagram concept because that's really what it is, especially when you're working with, a married couple or a family.
Yeah.
You've really got to Venn diagram the whole thing and find that center sweet spot where everyone's needs are touched on.
Yeah.
And concept-driven design does that really well because you've taken an assessment of the character and the needs of each person and brought it into play.
Sure.
Right now, the client who is in the happy phase 2 and we're doing her kitchen, she lives alone and she has a small cabin, like about an 850 square foot place up in the hills. And to make sure that the thread underlying all of our design comes together, I've chosen the concept English Rose because that's who she is. And she's really soft and she's delicate and she has romantic taste. And a lot of her pieces are, English country furniture pieces. So English Rose, there's going to be pinks and there's going to be a little bit of this English vibe, but it's a cabin. So we're not ignoring that.
Right.
But everything now, like the outside is going to be those English country cottage colors. And we're not trying to do something edgy or crazy. We're just going for softness and beauty and comfort. And it's making her really happy.
Yeah.
And that's what design should do. It should make people happy.
Well, it feels like concept design is driven, it should be driven, right, by a strategy that you're confident will achieve your objectives, right? So defining what the objectives are for a client, what is happiness to them, what's going to make them happy, those kinds of things. What is the criteria, success criteria, right? And how do you know you've been successful?
Yeah.
And well, you've been successful because you achieved your objectives, but if you don't clarify what those objectives are, right? And so all of that work you guys did with us, right, to understand what success looked like, and then once we had alignment around expectation, right, then you were able to then come back and say, oh, okay, well, we're gonna apply these strategies to acquire these mood boards and these ideas and these concepts, and and it was a collaborative, very collaborative process. But what I call it consultative design or consultative sales, like understanding your client, understanding what their wants and needs are, and adhering to that.
Yeah.
You were talking about your mentor who was saying, "Don't be a selector." Design. I've often said that I feel like design is thinking personified. And so good design is good thinking personified and bad design is bad thinking personified. So where are you on that spectrum?
I would hope that I'm super,
I didn't
super
mean
personal.
you. I just meant generally, right?
Yeah.
Because I think because it comes from the client. Like I remember, bad clients often don't give a shit about the strategy part. They just want the problem to be solved.
Right.
And, yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting. There are superstar designers who, if you're hiring them to create their vibe.
Yes.
Yes. And, that would be,
you know what you're getting.
Sure.
With them,
like
right.
Mario Boada in New York, he's famous for layering super cabbage rose pattern things. And he does it with staggering skill. He's quite amazing, but you're not going to get a minimalist design from that guy.
Yeah.
And if you have a client who, wants some Zen, he's not your designer.
Yeah.
If you want something edgy and sexy and a little bit in your face and you're in Los Angeles and you've got the wherewithal, you might go to Kelly Wersler and, get something from her, and she's got an amazing, language, design language.
Yeah.
I may at some point in my career end up with a language like that. But today, my language is the client. Like that's really where I'm at. I am at who are you?
It's a bespoke solution.
Yes.
I mean, you're creating custom cut to fit.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. And that is actually what floats my boat more than anything else, is being able to come in and assess the need and find the solution.
Yeah.
I love doing that. I think that's that's the best part of design. So, whether we were clearing the citation in phase 1 and doing all of this strategy and figuring out what the most affordable work pathway would be to get that stuff done, or whether we were sourcing her kitchen cabinets, that's all part of the same thing. Design is solving problems. So here's a problem. What's our most elegant solution? Here's a different problem. What's our most elegant solution? Over and over and over again. And it's solutions to make life easier for the client.
Yes.
In whatever way that ends up, unfolding. That's my jam. Yeah.
Well, I like your jam.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's I mean, being a professional creative, I guess, whether you're an interior architect, interior designer, or a painter, or a graphic designer, or a dancer, I don't know. You're working in an economy, right? Buyers and sellers, supply and demand, and you can't pick your clients. I mean, you can, and then maybe you're at a point in your career where you can be more selective with your clients and, find those clients that are more savvy, that are going to be more fun to work with. You don't have to, the learning curve for them is not, so steep. Do you feel like you've gotten to a place in your career where you can be more selective?
In a sense. Yeah. And the sense is this: I can tell pretty quickly if we're a good match or not. And that's the most important thing to me.
Yeah.
I want to, it's a relationship, and it's a really intimate relationship. So I want it to be fun, and I want it to be a good match. And I'm willing not to take the job if it's not a good match. Yeah. It won't serve the client if I'm not their girl. It just won't.
Shared values.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we need to be able to enjoy each other's company.
Right. Well, it's a marriage, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we better, if we're going to get married, let's date a while, and let's make sure we can stand each other, because we're going to be together for a while.
Yeah. A great example of that is, I'm up at the cabin. We're supposed to have a meeting with the contractor. He's running late. Everyone's really tense because everyone's on different timelines. And both the client and I were starting to stress out because our meeting was pushed like 45 minutes, and we both saw our days dominoing into hell.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, well, this isn't how I want to live.
Yeah.
So I just looked at her and I said, we do have fun. And she's like, yeah, we do. I said, so let's just set aside our entire agenda for this meeting and walk around your house and talk about what you want.
Yeah.
And we ended up having this spontaneous just walk around, imagine, plan, dream sort of meeting. And suddenly the 45 minutes was gone.
Yeah.
The contractor showed up, and everything was back on track, and we felt like we hadn't lost anything.
Right.
And it was because we like each other.
Yeah.
You know, and play has to be like the fundamental modality for all of this. You know, and I think, I don't know why Rothko just popped in my mind, but, you know, when I look at a Rothko painting, I feel this sense of play. Like he seemed, I don't know him, I don't know like the backstory of his work at all really, but he did seem to really love color, obviously. And I heard something about his intention with the paintings where you're supposed to sit in front of them for a long time and let your eye just go up, traveling up and down the transitions of those colors. Because there's, from what I remember being told, he painted emotion into those colors.
Yeah, sure.
And so the movement through the color clouds is moving through different emotions. So there's nothing more playful than that.
Yeah.
You know, or the way Matisse did those big gestural flowers and, you know, dancing figures, and, you know, there's just, you know, or, you know, Basquiat's graffiti or whatever it is, you know, there's a lot of play in, you know, there's play in David Hockney's colors. Like, oh God, those colors. You know, color is probably one of my favorite aspects of design. And, you know, I'm always wanting to infuse really, really fun color into a project where it's appropriate. You know, sometimes, you know, things cannot be neon yellow or, you know, electric pink, but
right.
it's really good when they can.
Have you ever had a client who's colorblind?
I haven't.
Yeah. All right.
No,
Yeah.
but that
might be an opportunity.
Yes, very much so. I would love that.
Yeah.
You know, because then it's about shades.
Right.
Right. Then it's about value.
Yeah.
You know, and it can be tonal and subtle and. Yeah.
So if you had to shift gears tomorrow, and you know, right now your business model, your business strategy is very client driven, right? Like you're creating bespoke solutions. But if tomorrow your business model changed and it was all about hiring Nina to do what Nina does because Nina's design language is just in great demand. What would your design language be?
It would be color-based.
Yeah.
It absolutely would be color-based. It would be color, and it would really be about surface materials. Because surface materials create the container that we're in. You know, we're in this room that has this awesome deep gray on the walls, and you know, and the windows bring in a certain kind of light. So my most fundamental design aesthetic is, what color is this and how does it feel to the touch and the eye?
Yeah.
So I like to create spaces that have a really, really beautiful feeling in that sense. You know, and I want it to feel sexy, you know, to the feet, you know, you know, and the eye.
Yeah.
And that's what that would definitely be a dream path for my career. When I was just entering design school, I was doing some vision boarding about where I wanted my career to go, and international color consultant was the title that I came up with for myself. You know, I saw myself doing magenta glowing airport terminals.
I want to fly into that airport.
Like, you know, you get off a plane and you step into the terminal and it's just this giant glowing magenta cocoon. Like, how about the
By the way, I think
there
was such a cocoon at Burning Man this fall, but that's a whole nother story.
That sounds, I've got to make it to Burning Man one of these years.
You do have to make it to Burning Man. I'm not one of those folks that are going to be like annoying about like, you know, oh, Burning Man this, Burning Man that.
Yeah.
But as a creative professional, it should be a requirement.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I think maybe this coming year might be the year.
Good. Well, we'll talk more about that because I my buddy's camp might be a good place for you to start.
Okay.
But our listeners do not. They've heard me talk enough about Burning Man.
Okay.
They don't need to, But
yeah. But we could talk about color cocoons.
Yes, color cocoons. This is the concept for your camp at Burning Man.
Right. I mean, and I learned quite a while back, and I can't remember the source, that in certain psychiatric institutions, I remember where I learned this. I learned this from Judith Corona, my color theory teacher. In institutions, sometimes they have a room that is the color of Pepto-Bismol. That pink, that very specific pink. Because apparently, if you are placed in such a room, because you're having a stress incident, that color will actually take you down to neutral.
Sure.
So Pepto-Bismol pink as a chill factor.
Yeah, right.
Not only your insides, but your outsides too.
The whole person.
The whole person.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, that gets into color theory. I love this idea that you would be this international color consultant.
Totally.
That sounds like a pretty cool gig.
Right?
Yeah. Is that what, when you retire, is that what you're going to retire into?
I'd love to retire. Yeah. I mean, out of that, I see like the effectiveness of color, like a pro bono project, for example, that I'd love to do with color is there's a lot of writing and a lot of theory that I think is very valid about neighborhoods and communities that are distressed or blighted, contributing to violence and crime. And what if there was a grant to take an entire block and help that entire block get all the trash out of the front yards, paint the facade of every house, just like the painted ladies in San Francisco.
Yeah, right.
So you had, when you are in that painted lady neighborhood of San Francisco and you see a pink one and a blue one and a coral one and a pale green one and then another sky blue one and a violet one, your heart actually responds to that. It feels better.
Sure.
You feel valued.
Yes.
And if you stepped out of your door in your neighborhood, in your underserved community, and every house on the block was beautiful, maybe you wouldn't feel so irritated. Yeah. Maybe you'd feel more supported.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you would feel like you had a little more of a shot. Yep. And that's an application of design that I know that there are some color innovators out there doing that and getting grants to do that. But that's a major project that I would love to see happen as a study in how positive community-oriented design can affect the safety of neighborhoods. Sure.
Well, I mean, part of what you're getting at is this idea of how public art can be used, right, for the public good. And and we've always known, right, that historically speaking, I guess tip of the spear of gentrification was the artists who, unintentional, of course. But, they moved into the blighted area of town because it was all they could afford. And typically big spaces, their studios, they could set up studios. They could afford the space. Those artist studios started to, populate that little area. Eventually there was a coffee shop, groovy little resale shop, groovy little underground bar. Next thing you know, a few gallery openings. Next thing you know, it's the hip, trendy part of town. And then eventually, money comes in, rents go up, and the artists move out, right? Yep. That's the historical
That's the cycle.
Right? Yeah. And that was happening naturally, organically, if you will. But now, of course, real estate developers are hip to this in a big way. And they're paying, I hope some aren't paying. Some are paying, I guess, decent money to artists, but they're intentionally hiring artists to come and put up public art, street murals on their buildings or in their neighborhoods to drive up value. The Wynwood district in Miami is a classic example of this. So I think what you're talking about is already happening, but maybe with not the goodwill.
Yeah, definitely
intention.
with a different objective.
Yeah, right.
Right. I used to be an elementary school teacher, and
I did not know this.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Yeah, that was my first career.
Oh my God. So this is your second career
This
then?
is my second career.
Look at you, smarty pants. I already knew you were smarty pants, but wow. So, okay. I don't want to distract. I want to go back to that though. That's okay. Amazing. What grade? Tell me quick.
I taught K1, 2.
Oh my goodness. Okay. We're going to come back to that. Finish your thought.
Gosh, I don't even know where I was going with all that. Oh, I was going to say, in teaching for LA Unified and being in, underserved communities constantly. Yeah. I taught down at Vermont and Olympic. I taught at Mitchell Terrena Street in Silver Lake before Silver Lake had become Silver Lake.
Yeah, right.
And, the families are poor. Yeah. And they live in really small spaces. Yeah. And they don't have, the time or the resources to, beautify their front yard, and yet one of the things that I noticed about the kids over and over again, and this was one of the earliest seeds in my becoming an interior designer, is that they valued the pristine organization and the clarity and the beauty of the classroom. If you were a kid in a classroom that was well done, you talked about it. Like the kids on you would hear the kids on the playground talking about, well, in my classroom, we have this bulletin board and, we have this, Castle Center and we have the special reading corner and we have, and the teachers.
And we've got the iguana.
Yeah. Right. And all of that is actually teachers doing interior design. Right. It's under the name of classroom planning, but it's interior design and it's all for the client who's the kid. Yep. And I noticed at a certain point in my career that I obsessively rearranged the furniture. I could not stop rearranging the furniture. I was always looking for a slightly better layout. Yeah.
Why is the Feng Shui so challenging sometimes?
Oh, well, because you're trying to shoehorn. At that point, I had 35 kindergartners that I was trying to shoehorn into, like a 30 by 30 classroom. It was
good luck.
Mission impossible.
Right.
So,
so the design language that you talked about, right? Surface materials, right? I love it because, of course, I want to be rubbed the right way.
Yes.
We all
do, right?
I mean, you talk about sexy under the feet. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you want to be comfortable. You want to feel good, right? And, but I'm also wondering, and I know these are specialties that may not necessarily be tools in your toolbox. I don't know, but how far does that go? To what extent does, because, you're talking about materials and touch. So, the senses, the 5 senses, right? So to what extent do we begin to include the other senses? So for example, how a house or room smells or how it sounds, how do the sonics play into this? How do the aromas play into this?
Well, I think you could take it all the way. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really big on, I have a little diffuser and I use aromatherapy all the time. I love it. And, I've got lavender or cinnamon or eucalyptus going, something. And houses that have fountains in the front or in the back so that you feel, you hear water playing. That's a big thing in Feng Shui is, which I'm not an expert in at all, but there is a water corner. There's a wood corner. There's a fire corner, there's a money thing. There's don't have the stairway directly meeting the front door because your money is going to spill out of your house. There's all that stuff. So, I mean, in a really, really thorough, sophisticated, layered design, you could go all the way. Absolutely. One of the things they talked about in my design program was siting. And siting is the skill set of making sure that the way the project is oriented on the property is optimal.
Yes.
Where the light comes in, where the function of this room is best in the east and, versus something for the west, all of that, the siting is super important. There are architects that will camp out on a property for weeks
Sure.
to get a sense of the siting and how the sun and the wind play on that property before they start figuring out where the front door is going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that level of thoughtfulness, right, is something that I know I appreciate. It is amazing to me. Everybody's different, right? Whatever spins your prop, as they say.
Yeah.
But, if design thinking in art education and whatever were taught, from kindergarten up, as is math or English or whatever, would our lifestyle, would our culture be more thoughtful and be more designed? Because if people don't value it, right, it doesn't get done, right? So it's amazing to me how bad design thrives, and there's a lot of development happening in LA, houses and things. And it just feels like we're going through this pandemic of McMansions and, thoughtless kind of design, trying to get as much square footage.
Right.
One of my pet peeves is in going into a house is wasted space or wasted energy, right? Like high ceilings that go to nowhere. What does that mean for upkeep and maintenance? How the hell do you clean those windows way up there, et cetera, right? Yep. And so as a professional interior architect, interior designer, like what are some of your pet peeves that you're seeing right now where it makes you scratch your head going, God, I wish I could fix that?
Lot lines. Building to the lot line drives me crazy because I believe that buildings need to breathe. Yeah. Because people need to breathe. Yeah. So if a builder was willing to sacrifice a certain amount of square footage to some open green space surrounding a property, there'd be more breath around that entire project. Yeah. So anyone walking by the project or driving past it would feel that breath and it would be transmitted, and there'd be a collective reduction in stress, maybe infinitesimal, but it's there. It is documented that open green space reduces public stress. Sure. So, have pocket parks. There's a little bit of land usually around every freeway on-ramp and off-ramp. And in my old neighborhood in Hollywood, there's a very, very strong Hollywood, the Hollydale community. It's a very amazing neighborhood organization. They got a pocket park made in their version of that triangle of land. And now when I drive by that old neighborhood and I see that, I can just feel my shoulders dropping down. So that's a big thing for me is build, like, let's not build to the lot line. We don't need those extra, like 100 square feet is not necessarily a make it or break it thing. And if you design the interior correctly, it really isn't. Right. So that's one thing. Nothing else is just jumping off right now, but I do think like in commercial places like coffee houses, there should always be a place to stand or sit outside the place. Like we should always, gathering spaces are really important in commercial development. Over in Atwater Village, there's one particularly amazing spot where the sidewalk is like triple deep, and the couple restaurants and coffee houses right adjacent to that piece of sidewalk are able to put out a number of cafe tables, and it feels like a miniature European town square. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. Like just a little bit of real estate. So could we have bigger? Oh, that's a huge civic pet peeve is where are the sidewalks?
Yeah.
Let's encourage walking.
We don't walk in LA though, Nina.
Yeah, but, some of us don't.
If we had sidewalks, maybe we would.
If we had more sidewalks.
Yes.
Yeah. So sidewalks, pooling and gathering spaces. There's actually a whole study that's called placemaking, and it's about how the same space with just a few tweaks, a little bit of different hardscape can become an actual place as opposed to a nothing, and people gravitate to places. A coffee house that has, that extra triangle of real estate in front of it can be really successful. Whereas the one with a really skinny strip in front of it, people are just going to zoom past it. And there's not that lingering doesn't happen. That inspiration to stop for 15 minutes and have a cup of coffee doesn't happen, and that should happen in our own homes too.
Yeah.
We should have lingering, lingering is good.
Well, lingering is good. And hopefully we'll get back there.
Yeah.
Right. It feels like maybe at one time the idea of lingering, and when I'll include the family dinner, right? Like
yes.
Families used to come together for dinner.
Yep.
I don't think we do that as much anymore.
No.
Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, no, the lot line thing, I couldn't agree more. I mean, because it gets back to the Feng Shui thing too, positive, negative space, like letting the energy flow freely and in a thoughtful way, but also just being somebody that appreciates the out of doors. I want the flow, the indoor outdoor flow to be part of the overall experience of the property. And I would argue, probably incorrectly, but I would argue that ultimately over time, a house that is designed more thoughtfully that way, it might be less square footage,
yes,
but it's going to hold its value, or you're going to make that value or that money up because people are willing to pay a premium, I think, for that kind of thoughtful design.
Oh yeah.
Ultimately.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I just recently read an article on why Japan is so clean. And it was just this really interesting, article, it was clickbait, but it was good clickbait.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is that all Japanese school children are made to clean up their own environments.
Yes.
They all have tasks every day.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yes.
So they're much less likely to disregard the environment.
Yes.
Because from an early age, they're made to be responsible for it.
By the way, this proves a point that I've been trying to make, vis-a-vis the environmental movement, because we want to politicize it. We want to, make it about causality, do humans impact climate change, etc. We get bogged down in the weeds, right? And I've just said for a long time now, like you don't overcomplicate it. Mom said, clean your room. Mom said, pick up after yourself. Mom said, keep the house clean. That's all this is. That's about keeping our planet clean and tidy.
Yes.
Because that's what Mom said. And because it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
It's our home. It's where we live. It's where we sleep.
That's right.
Give me a fucking break. Who gives a shit whether or not, man causes, litter.
Yes.
How did the litter get there otherwise?
Right.
Anyway, I don't mean to get into it, but I love that story.
Because if you spent your grade school years with regular shifts picking up the trash on the playground or washing out the sinks in the restrooms or doing the things that these kids actually have to do, then when you go to a public restroom, you're not going to leave your paper towel on the counter.
Yeah.
You're going to put it because somebody's going to have to pick that up.
Yep.
And we're a little, particularly I think in America, we're a little bit disconnected from how things get done. And
totally. We don't know where our food comes from.
No.
We don't know where our bottled water comes from.
And so it's, in my apartment building, we have the blue can and people throw their recycling in it, but they throw it in there in a plastic garbage bag, which actually contaminates the entire can. So the entire can can't be recycled because there's a plastic bag in there. And if you go on the LA DWP website and read about the garbage protocols, you'll learn that if any blue can has anything in it that contaminates it, the entire can is just diverted from the recycling stream because they don't have time to pick it up. They don't have time to pick it apart.
Right.
So I wrestle with being the preacher in the building. I don't like really.
Well, I would argue that, and this, of course, would take a major movement to ever get enacted. But I would argue that the brands and the manufacturers have to be responsible for the entire life cycle of their package.
Well, that would be incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you put it into the world, then you have to deal with it.
Yes.
So that's going to force them, right, to innovate in ways of minimizing their packaging and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's a brilliant book about that called Cradle to Cradle.
Right.
Bill, and I'm blanking on his last name, but we studied him in design school, and the whole cradle to cradle movement, where just like what you said, you bring something into the world. What's its first life cycle? What's its second life cycle?
Yeah.
What's its third life cycle?
Right.
And that it shouldn't be a cradle to grave, because we are right now essentially a cradle to grave society.
Yeah.
Where we make something and it's going to die.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And it's going to just land in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
I would love. It's a huge part of design, and a lot of packaging companies are working very hard to make their products consumable, compostable, biodegradable, so there is effort,
for sure.
There's good effort out there, a lot of good intention.
Yeah. I wish there was more effort though in designing houses that don't look so homogenized.
Yeah.
Like, is that another thing that I know it bugs the hell out of me? It feels like I'm driving around all over the place and all the houses look the same.
Well,
what's that about?
It's interesting. Every person who's getting a house built has a different aesthetic, and
doesn't feel like it around here. It feels like it's all the same.
Well, I mean, but this, there are certain neighborhoods where there was a development.
Yeah.
And a developer came in and said, I'm going to build 24 houses, and they're going to be a variation on this plan.
Yes.
And there's something, honestly, I think there's something kind of cool about that.
Yes.
Like there are so many neighborhoods in Hollywood and East Hollywood that are just rich with craftsman bungalows.
Right. Sure.
My family owns a Sears Craftsman kit house.
That's amazing.
1913.
So cool.
It's a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. And sadly, the Craftsman kit that was next to us got razed. Now it's going to be 3 quasi-Mediterranean townhouses.
I have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Silly, stupid question, but why is it called raising when it's really, the knocking down?
I don't know. I think raise is a pretty cool word, because what I see when I say the word raise, I see a giant, machine claw just coming in and scraping something right off the
why
earth.
do we call it raise when it's scraping? I don't know.
Well, scrape, you could call it scraping.
Yeah.
And that would be pretty legit.
But that's sad.
It is.
It is. And not, I mean, when Channing and I were looking for homes, because LA it's all about what have you done for me lately, right? And maybe that's, everywhere. But I hate the fact that, so much of architectural history gets lost in the name of progress, or, and these kind of iconic homes or what have you. But when we were looking for this place so many years ago, we happened to look at a house that the house wasn't, the house was interesting because it was very unusual for LA. It was what I call kind of a Nebraska farmhouse kind of style, but it was the lot was fantastic. It was like an acre lot, which was like unheard of, and we loved it. ultimately we didn't get it, I think for good reason, but it turned out it happened to be owned by Tim Conway, the comic.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace. And so we lost it to a developer who scraped it.
Yep.
And built a $8-9 million stone mansion, I guess, on the property. That then it was a spec home. Mm-hmm. It sat on the market. It just sold, apparently. So what is that? 5-6 years, that this thing was just sitting there.
Right. See, that kind of development needs a little more guidance and oversight than it seems to have. I don't know what goes behind that or how projects like that get pushed through, especially when there's a housing shortage.
Yes.
And historical character is something that cannot be like regenerated. Once it's gone in a place, it's gone. You know? And the neighborhood that my family's little craftsman is in is, you can't stop change. It's just going to happen, but most of the people, like when my parents bought that place in the mid 80s, it was not a popular neighborhood and it was very, very run down and mostly renters. And over the last 30 years, it has turned into a vibrant, family-centered neighborhood. They have a Halloweeny every year with like all the little toddlers parading up and down the street. 30 years ago, it was, a couple of scraggly dudes with guitars that you weren't sure you wanted to be friends with.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, I don't know.
Yeah. So what advice would you give your younger self? I mean, for those younger listeners out there who maybe aspire to, look into interior architecture, interior design as a career path. I mean, what would you say to them and what advice would you give to your younger self?
The very first thing I would say is take the leap. Just do it. Just go for it. Whatever your impulse is if you have an impulse to do a certain kind of work, just figure out how to do that work. From a fairly early age, I knew I loved to, strip window moldings and repaint them and, make curtains out of Japanese rice paper and just do weird stuff like that. And for some reason, I just didn't think that was sensible. So I got a California teaching credential instead. And it wasn't that wasn't valuable, but it really wasn't my calling. And so I didn't listen to the little voice that said, I want to play with paper. I want to play with paint. I want to go to Chinatown and buy 1,000 white cups and glue them to the wall. I had those impulses and I just didn't listen. Yeah. So take the leap and listen.
Was it not practical? Was it like, and some of this also comes, and I, don't know your parents and but I know my parents and, being from the Midwest, I mean, this idea of getting a real job was very, very prevalent. Yeah. So in your world, as you were pondering that, was being a teacher just more practical? Like, why did you?
Yeah, it was practical. Yeah. And I grew up with, I had hippie parents, like super hippie parents who would have just loved it if I had made a career out of rice paper. And, but because their work path had been so rambling. I mean, my mother had like 4 careers. She was a makeup artist and then she made wedding cakes and she ended her, working life as a brilliant caregiver, but she's had so many different jobs. Yeah. My father was an actor and, acting is a very fickle profession. Yeah. And so he's had a lot of ups and downs in his career. And I didn't want any of that instability. Yeah. I was just like, no. Right. And so teaching, there couldn't be anything more stable than teaching. Yeah, right. So I was drawn to it because of the stressors of my childhood, you know, like I had creative parents, so I was not going to be creative. Thank you very much. You know,
in spite of having creative genes.
It's so I kind of like rebelled and it bit me in the foot because, or the butt or wherever. I ended up having to finally say, you know what? I'm not going to be happy unless I play with color. So I'm just going to do it.
Right.
So luckily I jumped on the boat.
So that gets to listening to your intuition, right? Listening to your gut.
Yep.
Having the courage to listen to your gut and then act on it.
Yep.
Right. So having the awareness to listen to your gut and then the courage to act on what you're hearing.
Yeah, because I think we all have an incredibly powerful, useful, spot on interior voice that's telling us what's what. We all have that. But some of us are much better at trusting and listening to that thing.
Yeah.
Some of us are like, oh yeah, I'm with you.
Right.
And then me, I was like, really? No way. You know?
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time to come around to, oh yes, definitely.
And you're not always going to get it right.
Right.
I mean, you know, like I look at my own life and I realized that there were times that, you know, I got it right. I listened and I acted and nailed it and it was the right thing. And then there are those moments where your intuition's telling you one thing, but maybe it's not what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Or so you overwrite it or you try to fit, you try to say, well, maybe I know best or that's not really happening. And so you go left when you should go right and it blows up in your face.
Totally.
Yeah. So, you know, but yeah, I mean, it's those can be devastating when you don't.
They can
listen.
But that's one of the things, you know, I went through a phase in my career where I was deathly, and I mean deathly, afraid of making mistakes. Like I couldn't.
What was that about?
It was just about having to be perfect and get it right on the first time every time. Like whether it was.
Where does that come from? Did that come from your parents? Did that come from your own? Was that self-imposed?
Yeah, it was just my thing, and I had a lot of stress and freaking out about like the running message that my head was playing was you can't make a mistake. You can't make a mistake, which is like such a dead end.
Yeah.
It's such a paralytic. It's just going to completely stop you, you know? And so I had to kind of retool that message, and it's taken time, but now it's like there are no mistakes. There's just incredibly valuable takeaways, you know, like, oh, that didn't work. So now I'll do it this way. And you know, what are you going to do? Like, make mistakes. Mistakes are the best learning tools on the planet.
Yeah, I call it the price of an education.
Yes, you know? I love that. That's really good.
Yeah, you should be learning from these things.
Right. And most of them are very affordable.
Yeah,
you know, it's rare that you make a mistake that's so costly that you can't pay for it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, perhaps the most costly thing is lost time, right? Because there's few things more valuable than your time.
Right.
Time's most valuable.
Yep. That's true. Yeah.
You know, one of the struggles that I know a lot of artists have and professional creatives have, and I'm wondering if you have the similar struggle, is the expectations of clients and how the process works and the role of spec work in winning new business, right? So, you know, oh, well, we're asking for concept sketches, you know, in the RFP process, right? We're you know, we'd like to see what you would do,
right?
You know, versus them, the client, you know, hiring based off of reputation or portfolio or what have you, and in some cases, some of the more egregious examples of this is what I call the exploitation of artists, when clients expect work done for pro bono or for free. And this happens a lot kind of in the visual art side. Sometimes, you know, brands that will try to convince you to do work for exposure.
Right.
Exposure bucks.
Right.
Well, what does the role of spec work play in your reality, and how are your clients in terms of hiring you? Do they hire you based on your portfolio and your experience, or do they expect to see some ideas before they take the leap?
Well, that's a great question. Typically, I am engaged based on word of mouth and recommendations of, I've done, client A's bathroom, and now client B wants a bathroom.
Yeah.
But, and my favorite little cabin in the hills job that I'm doing right now just was a recommendation. A friend pointed me in the client's direction. The most typical spec work that I do are those initial meetings and walkthroughs where I do my best to deliver or convey how I would design the project, how I would create a concept, what my process is. I try to help the client understand what their own scope is, because that's usually a huge issue is they know they need stuff, but they don't know what it is they need. And then I'll write up a proposal. And sometimes that proposal will have inspiration images in it so that they can understand the direction that I'm aiming towards.
Yeah.
One of my family's slogans, which came from my dad's acting career, but is, I think, useful for just about anyone in a creative endeavor, is give them what they want as cheaply as possible. Like, we don't have to sweat blood or bullets to give someone a taste or convey an expression. We can just take a sandbox and make a finger painting in it. And that can be a really powerful calling card.
Yeah.
I think that learning how to present gestural calling cards that express our abilities, our intellect, our talent, but don't give the whole show away.
Yeah.
That's the ticket, And yeah, I can see where I do a room in a show house for exposure? Absolutely. I have no problem with that. Would I do a whole house for exposure? I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, would I do a concept board to win a big job? Sure. There's a certain amount that you have to take a risk and say, I'm going to put a really bloody weekend in. I'm going to make an incredible presentation.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll get this thing, And if it's a really big project that's going to just be amazing and lead to a year of work or maybe a lifetime collaboration, why not?
Yeah.
And every time I do one of those, they end up paying off one way or another. Sometimes not in, closing that particular deal, but I now have that in my back pocket. It's one more elevator pitch that I've created, and refining my pitch always that's part of the requirement. I need to be able to say who I am and what I do. And I'm always looking for a better way of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Cutting through the clutter in a memorable way that is succinct enough for people to, take in and remember.
Yeah.
In a compelling way.
Yeah. I mean, when you get put the hard question, like, well, what makes you special? What makes you different?
Right.
Why you and not somebody else?
Right.
I could just say, well, because it's me. It's because there's only one of me, but how do I convey what that me is?
Well, the question, there's a question that I got years ago that still haunts me to this day. I mean, I say haunts, jokingly, because it was actually very helpful. I was young, I was 27 or 28, and I was working. I was working for a design agency. We were doing consumer goods, branded packaging primarily, and we had worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, biggest companies in the world. But the challenge, of course, was that a lot of those projects were under NDA. You can't talk about them, all that stuff, right? And I called this, I forget his name now, but he was, the VP of basically vice president of packaging design, probably for Brown-Forman. And Brown-Forman owned Jack Daniels and Korbel and, some big liquor brands. So I call this guy and, I laugh now because, here was a guy who's probably, I'm guessing he was in his 50s, here's this 27-year-old, punk kid calling him up, trying to sell his wares. And I'm on the phone with this guy and I'm in my little pitch, telling him who we are, whatever. And he just stops me cold. And he said, Scott, he goes, I don't care about any of that. He goes, I only care about the answer to one question. And I don't, based on this answer, I will hire you. He's like, I don't care how big you are or small you are, how accomplished you are, how many awards, doesn't matter to me. All I want to know is what is the one thing that I can get from you that I can't get anywhere else in the world? Like, what are you giving me that I can't get anywhere else in the world? And that was just cut right to it. Right. And I think that's kind of the core of what you're getting at. It's like, how do you tell your story?
Right.
That resonates in a unique way, but that is true to you. Right. And meaningful to the person that you're pitching to.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's
I know that's almost an unanswerable question.
Well, yeah, it was, and I was in the moment, when you're young and scared, right? You perhaps I should have said, that's great. Let me, duly noted. Let me get back to you. I'll call you, let's set up a meeting. But in the moment I said, well, the answer I give you is our team. I mean, you can't get our team anywhere else, like the minds and the intellects that we have working here are, unique in the world, and you have Ian Webb, you have Felix Scarlett, you have Ronald DeVlam, you have boom, so I sort of went that way, but that too was a cop out because anybody can say that shit. You know what I mean?
It's just like, I can stop tidal waves. You can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, Nina, I'm so grateful that you came and sat down with me today and talked about your work and your career. And I hope that I know that there was goodness in there for that listener out there, inspired or interested in interior design. Where can people find you? I am at ninahikendesigns.com. And if you go to my website, ninahikendesigns.com, you can email me through the website. And I'm local Los Angeles girl, and I have a car. Which, by the way, that little blurb there totally reminded me of something I wanted to ask you about, because this gets back to business development and how you get your clients and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of innovation happening in technology in terms of connecting buyers and sellers together in the creative space. One of those apps these days in your space has been an app called Houzz, Houzz. Yep. Do you use that app? Has that been helpful to you? And if so, why? And if not, why? I love all the design apps. Yeah. I use them as collaborative tools with my clients. For making concept albums so that we understand what direction the project's going. I don't use them as marketing for myself, but I could send a client to my album collection so that they could see what my sensibility and my taste is. I find that the specific marketing contracts are pretty pricey. And I just don't find it effective, especially when my work comes from word of mouth. It's yes, right. I don't know that many people that would hire a designer without some kind of personal recommendation. Yeah. It's a personal relationship. Would you would you hire a lawyer just off the website? You might want to. I typically find my lawyers off bus benches. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and Instagram, Houzz. Yeah. There are ways to have sort of a working, sort of very alive portfolio of ideas, and I think that's what they're great for. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I had to ask. I
Yeah.
was curious because
Sure.
I'm impressed by that app because it feels like they're doing a good job of using content to market services.
Yes.
Very
much.
But it's interesting. It sounds like maybe if you buy into the marketing thing, it can get costly.
It's pricey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's very expensive. It's hundreds of dollars a month.
Wow.
One of the keys is that you really have to have quite a serious body of work photographed.
Yeah. Right.
And honestly, I'm not so great at that. I need to get better.
Well, that's a whole,
but
I mean, join the fucking club, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many artists I know don't photograph their work?
Yeah. Which is a
Um,
crime. It's
right? Well,
Yeah.
and to be fair though, right? To do it properly, which we want to do it properly,
Yeah.
it's expensive.
It is. And that's kind of, and it takes a great deal of planning.
Yeah.
And for my work, I have to invade someone's space.
Yeah, sure.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of projects in the queue that need photographing. And, maybe if I had all of those, on disc, I would maybe try a year of house. I have a colleague that I went to design school with who is really successful on house and has a wonderful portfolio there. And in fact, when I'm searching for a particular kind of project or I'm trying to show a client an example of something, my friend's stuff comes up as like what I'm looking for all the time. I'm like, oh, there's Michael again. Awesome. Yeah.
So life is funny.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And only a few degrees away from you.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes less than that.
Yep.
Nina Hiken, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Was it fun?
It was so much fun.
Will you come back?
I will come back.
All right.
Yes.
I'll look forward to it.
All new experiences.
Sounds good. Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to like this episode and share it with your friends on social. And if you haven't already done so, please be sure to press subscribe and follow us on IG at Not Real Art Official. We appreciate the support. Sourdough out.